sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello, and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that gets all tied up in knots over everything sexy and kinky. Joining me, of course, this week is Bianca.
Hello.
And returning again is Andy from Forbidden Fruit, here to preview one of his upcoming ropes workshops. You can learn more about all of that at forbiddenfruit.com. But please give us a call for all things rope and bondage. We're going to be here at 512-686-0279. The number again is 512-686-0279. Andy, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, it's good to be back. So in case you guys forgot, I'm a local rope instructor. Been tying for a good while and just happened to have learned that I have an affinity for teaching it. So I just started doing that.
Nice.
Yeah, I really wonder how you go from knowing that you enjoy ropes to knowing that you enjoy teaching about ropes, because it feels like there's a missing link in that chain. I don't know how you get from one to the other.
So there's a funny story about it. I wanted to kind of create a place to be tied up and to have other people have that freedom. At my house, we called it Rope Lab at the time, which later was a bad idea because apparently Rope Lab already existed that I did not know. But we were really small and no one really cared about it at that time. So in that, I kind of got rolled into being a rope instructor, just teaching people who came, like going over the basics again and again and again. And just learning that I kind of love showing people how to do rope.
Roped in to showing people the ropes. And okay, let's just get it out of the way, get out of our system before we go any further. Okay, we were talking a little bit about the show, just about rope culture and how kind of confusing and maybe even intimidating that can be. So I guess I'd like to kind of explain to the audience, if we can, that there's certainly a lot more to ropes than just actually binding and confining your partner.
Yeah, for sure. If you look about like I'll get the basics out of the way.
Sure.
A lot of the Japanese style stuff that we do are either learned from, variations on, or like modified versions of military ties that are meant to bind prisoners. But beside that, rope itself has this way of messing with your fight or flight response. So I personally find that it kind of helps you get to this meditative Zen yoga-like space where you kind of reach this deep relaxation, then combined with endorphins and things like that, and then your body trying to figure out why can't I move, and then enjoying the fight or not enjoying the fight, or just having to have that mental struggle in your head.
Sure. What then would you say is sort of the broadest possible definition of what rope play includes? Because it's more than bondage, but I mean, that's certainly a big part of it.
A good example is Ichinawa, which is literally just means one rope, and it's where you take your rope and you wrap it around someone until you reach the end of the rope, and then you unwrap the person gently, and you start on over again. It's like essentially the whole idea is to kind of dance and move your partner in a way. And I think a lot of that is involved in rope as well, with like knowing body mechanics, being shifted around and played with in that way. There's the basic just binding that's also fit in with, in BDSM you have bondage. And like that's just binding someone so that they can't move. And like one of the most basic rope is just that.
Yeah, but there's all these different sort of, I guess, rituals to it. I know that when I first started going to different types of play parties and things along those lines, I would watch people take these very elaborate setups and spend all of this time, whether it was suspension or shibari or something even more simple than that, at least on the surface. And I would watch them like go through all of these steps to get set up. And for me, I was thinking that was like the lead up to the scene, that was just getting your toys out and laying out all your instruments. But in reality, as soon as they were done tying somebody up, there was no need necessarily for penetration or impact play or these different things that we think of as sex. You know, it wasn't just like the rope was foreplay and then the sex happened. That was the entire sex act. And I guess I would love to hear you just explain a little bit about some of the ritual that can go into all of this.
Part of it you kind of hit on. It's like love of the tool, like when you're setting up everything like around you. There's kind of like a ritual of this thing which brings you pleasure, you're laying it out and all those things. Same thing happens with impact and things like that, with people just lining shit up to then play with. I always liken it to dance. Other people call it flow. It's, you can feel this with sex too, where like you learn to move with your partner. And I think a lot of rope work is that kind of enjoying the bond between people, where you're feeding off the other person's energy, reading where the person will go next, being surprised when they go somewhere else. And like something which I've also found is interesting, and I have trouble with this one because it's whenever you're tying somebody up, especially with suspension specifically, like for the person suspending, it's all about tying the person up and then getting them up and then like making stuff look pretty because we care about that sort of thing. But then like you kind of have to shut yourself off and like read the person, be intuitive, but step back, because from that moment, unless you're going to do something to like the person who's like suspended, a lot of it is just letting the person enjoy the suspension.
Yeah, sort of that weightlessness, like you're in a flotation tank or something along those lines.
Yeah, and another big aspect is the endorphins of pain, because if you take, if you have a large amount of pressure over a small area, then that's going to cause a lot of their nerves in that specific area to activate to pain. So like whenever you suspend somebody, there's a lot of pressure. Say on like the lowest body part gets all the weight to it. So if someone's shoulder is like really low, they're gonna have this big, very hard like pain in their shoulder. And the endorphins play into like a really interesting, into feelings that way.
Yeah, and also I guess a really good reminder to make sure you know what you're doing before you tie somebody up, for sure, but before you tie somebody up off of the ground.
Yeah, anatomy is very important with this.
Yeah, I mean it's so baffling to me as a therapist, as a sex educator, because I come into it with all of this like fascination around human sexuality, but no engineering, no like anatomy, physiology, no, none of that type of expertise, and it's so beautiful to watch that skill set be able to be folded into our sexuality, which we wouldn't normally consider.
Yeah, it's having taught for a while, it was really interesting, like watching people, because I held my classes, I don't really like calling them that, like practice space.
Sure.
Once a week, so you'd watch someone do something for 3 hours once a week, and you'd see people go from just doing ground rope and then working on suspension with some basic harnesses and things like that. And I have a good history of like anatomy and things like that. But a lot of it is down to communication. But you also mentioned it earlier, like whenever you first start something, you don't know what you're getting into and you don't know what's out there. And I like to like
or even what you don't know.
That's the point. That's what I always like to like remind people, is the dangerous things are like the unknown unknowns. And like that's just kind of where you use, I hate the term common sense because it's not a very good term. But it's like you like
healthy hesitation, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. But yeah, like you stay in good communication. Like whatever you do, the amount of time that it takes you to do it tends to be about the amount of time that it takes you to undo it. So it's like knowing that like if someone says, hey, like my hand's starting to go numb and I don't like it, you should probably start untying. Or if you've been working with a person for like a long time, you can ask like, how long do you have in that hand?
Sure.
But it's all down to like, if you do something which you probably shouldn't do, it's good to remember that things can go bad pretty fast. So it's always good to have like things to cut the rope. Or I had someone ask me this question when I was teaching them some stuff the other day. Like, at what point do you cut the rope or do you not cut the rope? And it's like, if that thought crosses your head, you should probably cut the rope.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good point. And we'll talk a little bit later about, where to get your ropes, about what kind of ropes to buy. But, it is important to acknowledge that this is not cheap hardware store, bullshit. These are quality, expensive items, and people can make a real passion project out of getting into rope play. So I kind of get that hesitation, but I like where your head is at. Like, if you're having that concern, do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And speaking of which, I like to keep in mind, like, this is just like my own mental, imagine people with their clothes off. At least like 1/3 of people in Home Depot are probably shopping for sex toys.
Yeah. Fair to say. I mean, they've got chains, they've got ropes, all kinds of clamps. I mean, there's lots of opportunities.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure.
Well, we've got a couple of callers on the line, but before we jump into that, I just had a few more questions for, I guess, kind of the newbies. We're talking about this idea of, switch flow, or, what actually is rope play. Is it foreplay, which is a word I really hate because I think it overemphasizes our sexuality as being just about intercourse. And so in that vein, in that curiosity, is shibari or suspension or any of the binding, any of these types of things, would we categorize it as sex or not sex? Is it inherently erotic? I mean, when you're setting a scene up, what's the mindset, I guess?
It can be all of the above. I'm sorry to give you that answer.
Sure, yeah.
Like I tie with a few different people, and like it's very much like not sexual. Like there's a difference between like arousal and then sexual expression too. Like especially with like tying someone, like you can feel and get aroused without then acting upon that arousal. And like this is going to a different topic, but
sure.
I'll just touch on it super quick. Whenever you're tying someone down, consent is like really important to know what's on the table before the power to say what's not on the table is gone.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's just one of like the darker aspects of like rope, of like knowing beforehand what you're doing is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, could you ask the original question?
Oh yeah, just I mean, are we calling this sex?
Yeah.
If there's no penetration, I mean, not even necessarily nudity. Oftentimes,
like I kind of mentioned the word earlier, like yoga. Like this can literally be like a meditative exercise. Like everything with rope, it embodies like the concentration of a craft. It embodies like the practice of like a skill which you've been doing for like a long time. It can be very sexual. It doesn't have to be. Like you can sit there with like a column and just make pretty wraps around the column and like then transfer that to someone's body. Like it really can just be an art form.
Which is something that has taken me so long to wrap my mind around. And as an outsider, I still don't feel like I quite understand. But I'm curious maybe what other assumptions or misconceptions newbies might have if they walk into a play space that is full of expert rope tiers.
I always have been like a very fluid in my view of these types of things as possible. And I find that giving binds or a definition to it can be detrimental because it can embody so much.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. Well, with that, let's go ahead and jump on the phones. I know we've got a few people calling in.
Yeah.
Let's touch base with Snow here in Texas.
Snow in Texas? I didn't know that was possible.
Not the good stuff.
Yes, I'm Nevada-D. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. What can we do for you tonight?
Oh my God, I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm so happy and excited, and I've been watching this show for a while, and I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. You guys have taught me to be much more respectful and accepting of others. And I grew up in more evangelical, fundamentalist Christianity, so that means a lot. And
I definitely hear that struggle. I so appreciate you saying so.
Yeah.
But anyways, so here's a little brief story for the question I have for you guys. So I fell in love with somebody for the first time. I don't think they feel the same way, and they've been kind of ghosting me for weeks. I haven't heard anything from them, and that's caused like a lot of insecurity and pain. And the biggest thing is questioning if I ever will be in love again, and if this time somebody will actually love me back. So I wanted to see what advice you guys what you guys had to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let's just go ahead and get the obvious out of the way. Absolutely, you will love again and be loved should you choose to.
Yes.
I see no barrier to that. I can really guarantee that, to be honest with you. As strongly as I can promise anything, I feel like we can say that, yes, you will have those opportunities should you choose to take them.
Oh man, if being ghosted is a death knell to ever being in love, we're all in a lot of trouble.
Seriously.
Oh yeah.
With that, you're saying, I hear you saying that you're not really sure how they feel, but they've sort of ghosted you. I don't necessarily know what that looks like, if it's very blatant where, they've just promised to call and then never did. Perhaps there is some valid or legitimate excuse, but it seems like you may actually have the answer of whether or not they're into you.
Yeah, and I get it. It's a really sucky place to be, and I've been there many, many, many times. But it's interesting. The distance hurts at first, and it does get easier. It gets easier and easier, and you are okay to feel however you want to feel about that distance. You don't have to stop loving them right away, because that's unrealistic to expect of yourself. You can also be mad, or you can decide that you don't want to deal with love and romance for a little while and, focus on other things. So however you want to deal with this internally is okay. So let yourself feel whatever it is that you need to feel about it. But also, yeah, it's something that everybody goes through just about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like you have to, I don't know why this analogy is the one that came to me, but have you ever skipped rocks?
Yeah, across a pond
on a
or something?
pond?
Sure.
Yeah, I grew up near a lake, so maybe for some reason it's resurfacing after all of this time. But it's kind of like that. Like, in order to learn how to skip a rock, some of them are going to fall to the bottom of the lake, right? So you're going to have to throw out some rocks, and you're going to hope that they skip, and they're not all going to. And it's kind of a rite of passage. And that's not to belittle the situation at all, but it is to say, know how you feel.
And I think it's a great metaphor. I'm sorry to step on what you're saying, but it's a great metaphor because some rocks are easier to skip than others, because as you skip more stones, you do get a little bit better at it, and you develop some strategies and things. But also, sometimes things just sink, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
Something which I always like to keep in mind is that everyone is very unique and different, and just because you feel your love in a way for somebody right now, the way that you feel love for anybody else is going to be different, and the way that it's expressed and the way that they love you will always be different from person to person. Now, I'm a hopeless, humanitarian and things like that, so I always feel that it's worth it, the threat of feeling pain and of rejection, just because the payoff in the end is always worth having had the experience of somebody else being in your life. It can be hard to have that opinion.
Sure.
But I've somehow kept it up all this time. I always think that it's worth it trying to go out and meet someone else new again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder that everybody who you meet is going to be unique. So your relationship with one person, whether or not it's a good relationship, a lasting relationship, both of which are different things, by the way.
Sure, absolutely.
Good and lasting are not the same thing. It is worth noting that they are going to be different every time, but also you are going to be the same on some level. So if you can fall in love with somebody and you know how that feels inside and you like the feeling, you know you're capable of having that feeling and cultivating that feeling. That's something that you have and you own and you can give to other people. That's not something someone else is going to take away from you by not responding to texts. That's something that you know you can do. It's a skill and you're going to get better at it. And then it's just a matter of finding someone else who wants to practice with you.
So, Snow, I think we would encourage you to be that hopeless romantic if you want to be, and to know that you have those options and that opportunity. You know, in the meantime, I think that there's plenty of room for ice cream and sad movies, and for, you know, exercise and self-improvement. But, you know, in maybe a healthy ratio, I think that both can serve their purpose. So I hope that's a good place to start.
Thank you guys so much. I love your show. I love all of you guys. And yeah, thank you for calling. After the call. Thank you for listening to the call. Bye.
Bye. Have a nice
You have a
night.
great night. Thanks so much for calling.
Aw. I like Snow.
Yeah, it's a little heartwarming. Absolutely.
It's interesting. It's interesting thinking about that first ghost.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so painful.
Yeah, you know, and
Caleb.
I feel like I say this all the time between my clients as a therapist, between doing this show here. I hate to feel like I have to sort of justify my feelings about love, because obviously I've made my whole career about relationships, about love, about how people connect, while at the same time constantly telling people that it's fine. You know, your relationships end. It's okay. That as important as this thing is, it's also going to grow back. It's going to grow in these different ways, and there are different ways to water it. So,
And also, just to kind of go off of that as well, if there's no time limit in terms of like, oh, well, I don't know. I hate that, like, oh, you were only together for a month, so it wasn't real, or you shouldn't be always broken up about it.
People will say that you are allowed to mourn for one day for every week you were together, or try to create these algorithms for how to mourn.
It takes half the time you've been in the relationship to get over it. And it's like, well, that's not always the case.
Yeah, sure.
I always get frustrated when like I hear that, because everyone recovers differently. And
Right.
Like,
How can you possibly know that about another person?
Like I'm one of like the people where like it's like whenever like I meet someone who like I really like, it really doesn't matter how long it's been since I've been in like a relationship. Like it's been like weeks, it's been months, and it's other times it's just like it's an opportunity thing. It's not like life
absolutely.
just like is like, oh well, no, you're not allowed to date for like this long because like someone just broke your heart.
It's not like there's an HR program that's like making sure you have the appropriate credentials and you've been in your current position for a sufficient amount of time. And life just happens. It's a plant that's messy and it grows in weird directions, and you know.
Yeah.
Woo, we're going all over with metaphors.
Don't
love
simplify life.
Love it.
Okay, well let's jump again on the phones with Sarah if we can. Sarah, how can we help you tonight?
Hi.
Hello.
Hey, what's
You
on your
guys hear
mind? Yeah, absolutely. What's up?
Okay, great. So I spoke to you guys a couple weeks ago. I don't know if you remember me, Chris and B, about kind of like internalized slut shaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. So today my question is more about, so I've kind of identified as like bisexual, pansexual for a while, but I didn't think that I was really bi or pan romantic. So I've only ever romantically dated men, and my most recent boyfriend broke up with me about a week ago. So now I've been thinking like, you know, I kind of want to start dating women as well, and like see if I am romantically attracted to people, like, you know, kind of explore that side. But I realized I don't know how to flirt with women. So, you know, my whole life, you know, again, kind of going back to, you know, being socialized in a Christian environment, you know, I really don't know how to really navigate that field. I feel like anytime that I feel like a woman might be flirting with me, I'm like, well, does she just want to be friends? Because, you know, me and my friends, like...
It's a cliche for a reason.
It's real.
You're not the only one who's feeling that.
It is a real struggle.
Yeah, so, like, how do you even begin to explore that when you've been kind of socialized to at least act heterosexually, you know?
Mm.
Yes. It's... Oof, speaking to my heart right now. This is I think you hit on an interesting point that I do want to just point out really quick for the viewers as well. I think that a lot of people think they're not bi or pan romantic because they're uncomfortable flirting or being romantic with another gender. Because they're not used to it. So they're like, oh, well, I can picture myself flirting with and wooing a guy. I can't picture that with a woman, so I probably am not romantically attracted to women. No, it's just that you're back to square one. I've been on a couple of dates with a girl the last couple of weeks, and I was straight up. I was like, I'm a 13-year-old boy when it comes to flirting with women. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know if I should kiss you goodnight. Like, I don't know any of these things. So I think first off, just be honest about it. And if you're feeling a vibe, say, hey, like, this is what I'm feeling. I'm really nervous. I've never done this. Is this something you're interested in or not? I'm sorry. However you go about it, just be honest about that, because it can be really refreshing, especially if the other person is also feeling a little bit maybe uncomfortable or like this is new territory for them as well.
Yeah, if you're not feeling charismatic, if you're not feeling charming, it can be nice to be smooth and to feel like you got a good game and you can flirt well and all of that. But if that's not landing, you can still be genuine, right? You can still be communicative. You can still just express those things, maybe not in the flashiest way, but I think that there's actually a lot of value in taking some of the sheen off of it and just being direct.
Yeah. And it's an interesting balance to hit too, because on the one hand, you're like, okay, I want to be friendly and not offensive, and I don't want to invade their personal space. And on the other end, it's, okay, now I have to act like a creepy dude at a bar.
Oh my God. And that's the last thing I want to do, having been on the receiving end of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The male gaze is a problem, even for people who are not male.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I totally respect that. And that's something that I'm currently working through as well. One thing I would suggest, maybe to get some of the initial awkwardness out of the way, is get on a dating app and set your preferences, and then in your bio, be open about the fact that this is a new experience and you're looking for somebody who maybe has more experience to teach you, how to do this, or somebody else who's new and wants to explore, so that the matches that you get, apart from all of the couples who will want to induct you into their threesome.
Oh my God. Yes.
Yep. We're on the same page. We understand. Hopefully the people who do come to you with that will already have read that, will already be understanding of any potential hiccups along the way, and be able to laugh it off with you.
Yeah. So I have a kind of a second part to my question. So since I have only dated men thus far, most people in my life think that I'm straight. And, I'm out I'm in graduate school, so I'm out to most of my friends because, it's an intimate environment where they're very accepting of queer people. But, with like my family, for instance, they think I'm straight. And I've been wondering how to kind of navigate if I do start to date a woman seriously. Of course I wouldn't want to keep that relationship secret because that wouldn't be fair to her. I'd want to be open about, who I choose to have as a partner. But how do you kind of navigate that, especially with biphobia? Because a lot of people just don't understand what it's like to be bi or pan. They think, oh, so you're gay. And it's like, no.
You're half gay.
No.
Yeah. So you're not really gay. What? It's a tricky thing to navigate. The way I went about it was, before there was even any possibility of me bringing somebody home, I let people know, just super informal, just like, hey, by the way, I'm super loud online, so anybody in my friends or family list who's following me on Facebook knows way too much about me. But I did sit down with a couple of my younger siblings and let them know what was going on. And that way it didn't feel like an ambush, like, hey, I'm bi and here's the person I'm with, It was like, okay, so they're bi, and I know that most of my family doesn't understand what that means and doesn't think that it's ever going to result in anything other than a husband and children, because that's how things are in that world. But
right.
I have been open with them. I told them what to expect. So if at some point they are upset about it, I can be like, hey, like, that's on you. I was forthright. I let you know what was going on. You can decide whether or not you want to accept me in this relationship. But I think as soon as you know for sure that this is something you're going to want to pursue and this is something that feels right for you, I'd say get it out there, super informal. You don't need to have a coming out party or anything like that. If you want to, that's awesome, but you don't need to. It can be a super informal sit down over coffee with one sibling at a time. Say, hey, I like guys and girls. Yay. And then avoid the subject of non-binary gender altogether for another year. I think bringing it up now just as a thing that you are, just, hey, by the way. And then letting them deal with that on their own while you go live your life and get some hot chicks.
Something which something which I found really valuable, but also really difficult to apply to life is you're not required or you're not obligated to offer an explanation for almost every single aspect of your life to almost everybody in your life. So by just telling them like, hey, this is what is, and this is what I found really hard, might prime you to be defensive, but tell yourself 100 times over and over again that you don't need to be. And a lot of times the conversation's a lot faster and a lot easier than you ever thought that it was. If you just say this is what it is, let them ask questions, but then just kind of let them deal with what you just gave them without then having to feel like you then have to defend why or the specifics of it, or have to get into like a really deep, convoluted, difficult question. Because like I personally try to just like, unless I really need to, I will avoid those topics because I don't want to have that debate with someone. Because I'm really easy to drag into debates, but that's just me personally.
Yeah, no, I really agree with where you're coming from. Like, on the one hand, I totally hear what V is saying about how it can really kind of grease the wheels to, like, sit people down and sort of walk them through it when it's all abstract and hypothetical and before there's, like, an actual woman involved. And I want to recognize sort of the privilege of being able to just walk around and be who you want to be and expect other people to form around you. I know that may very well not be your circumstance. And, you know, as somebody who is able-bodied and 6'4" and male-presenting, if somebody looks at my fingernail polish or looks at, you know, the guy I'm holding hands with at a bar or whatever, I know that I have some opportunities and some privilege and some recourse should their things get dramatic that not everybody has. That being said, it is 2020, and you don't owe everybody a coming out story. You don't owe everybody this elaborately shot YouTube video that explains all of the details of your personality. There's nothing wrong with those. Those are great. I did it, and it saved so much time and hassle. But it's not anything that you owe to anybody, and I hope that you don't feel obligated to be just constantly making this a thing.
Yeah, there's this one particular family member of mine that I'm worried about, and it's my dad. You know, he's very, he's very traditional, very deeply conservative, very, you know, ultra fundamentalist. Didn't want me to go to college, for instance, because he thought I should, you know, just be married and pregnant right out of high school, right? So, that's like the biggest thing is I'm like, I don't even like want to even open up that can of worms, but and for complicated reasons, like he's, you know, in my life. I wish that he wasn't as in my life as he was, but just for how things are right now, I can't really limit that relationship. So it's like I'm just struggling with how to keep my own peace, but at the same time, like be true to, you know, my future girlfriend if that comes about. You know what I mean? So it's just it's a difficult situation.
It is, and I don't want to pretend that it isn't. I would say that you kind of hit on something that your presence is the greatest leverage that you have as an adult in your relationship with your parents. And so, you know, I hear you saying that he is in your life maybe more than you would prefer, and I'm sure that there are a lot of complicated circumstances behind that. And as a stranger on the internet, I'm not telling you to dismiss all of that, but I would encourage you to be curious, to not draw on too many assumptions, and to really ask yourself, do you have the opportunity to maybe pull back if or when he does start to be homophobic or judgmental or have these other unsolicited opinions. So it's a lot.
Yeah, no, it's definitely some stuff to think about. But you guys gave me, a lot to ponder, and it's really helpful to just kind of have a space where I can be like, this is who I am. This is kind of what I'm, working through. Just, it's like I said last time, I love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. You guys are a really awesome resource. So.
Thank you so much for calling. I hope that it goes great. I hope that this relationship is wonderful and that everybody gets on board. But certainly that's not always the case. And so if there's anything we can point you towards or any support or resources we can offer, please feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you. All right, you guys have a good night. Bye.
Take care.
Man, it's like my doppelganger, just a couple years before me, like back in like 2015.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seriously, I feel like I could pull out my phone right now, open any social media app, and immediately find 10 to 15 jokes or memes or images where women talk about how they don't know if the barista's just being nice to them or is desperately in love with them.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm not much help there because I'm super awkward. So I more of just like take the approach of like, this is what I'm feeling. Are you feeling the same thing? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that I was born into an online dating world so that I can just go ahead and lay out a couple of things and not have to chat somebody up at a bar.
Right? Oh my goodness. Can you imagine? That would be so exhausting.
Just like embrace the awkwardness in general and like people find it charming. That's what I find.
Right. As long as you know you're awkward and you're playing into it just a little bit, you're fine.
Right. Yep. I mean, as I said, if you can't be charming or suave, just be genuine. Right?
Yep.
Plays out. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about suspension and shibari, about binding. What can you tell us about some of these more elaborate or sort of advanced rope practices?
So suspension is one of my favorite to both do and experience. That's the one that I find like I've had to drive people home after they've been suspended. Like it'll put you in this very deep, like meditative, extremely relaxed, like about to fall asleep at the wheel of a car type feeling.
It sounds a little bit like when people are stressed out and they just say, man, I really feel like I need to get a tattoo this week.
Yeah, no, it's,
I totally
same
kind of vibe.
It's a very similar, it's a big relief. There's an interesting, like when you get up in the air, it's like everything kind of goes away and you're just focusing on what you're feeling. And then whenever you come down, there's this like rush of feelings and emotions that were just kind of held at bay that whole time. It's really hard to explain. Like I keep going back to like that meditative yoga, like finding that peace, that center, that balance, and then all of a sudden like the walls come down and just like flood. A really interesting style of rope that I find doesn't get talked about enough because it's really dangerous to teach is Hojo Jutsu. That's the origin of a lot of like the Japanese rope techniques. The reason it's so dangerous is because it explicitly is not taking the safety of the person being tied into account. These are military ties. They're meant to be punishing if fought.
So the more you struggle, the tighter it gets?
The tighter it gets, and usually around a choke point or a nerve or a place where you don't want it to get tighter. This is essentially wrestling with rope. So yeah, it's now keep in mind originally it was not in Japan. It was not this. Usually, if someone was being captured, they're already defeated. There's guys around them with spears. There's someone tying them up. They may not want to be tied up, but there's punishment of death if they fight. So it's like not exactly how we like to practice it today, where it's like, let's throw some mats down and tie each other up. So there's. That's more of like the extreme safety where like if someone falls and they're not tied up, they have arms to catch them. If someone falls and they are tied up, they don't. Sorry, my earpieces. Not very nice.
Yeah, well, it just strikes on, for me, one of the most interesting parts of kink in general, which is that so often, and it doesn't always have to be this way, and I don't mean to be prescriptive about it, but oftentimes our kinks are just a way of eroticizing the things that we're already afraid of.
One of the best descriptions I've ever kind of heard for kink is people who are kinky have learned to tame their demons. It's a way to get in touch with that part of you which is darkest. And it's a way to understand that all of us have this side of us and that you're not weird or scary or whatever for having it. It's how you express it. And I think the kink world and the BDSM world is a way to understand that, like, you can have these fantasies and you can act on these fantasies.
These things that are like part of our genetic heritage that are just like built into our DNA that don't necessarily have an outlet in daily life because we're not super into raping and murdering and destroying and all of these things, or try not to be anyway. We can channel some of those urges.
And like I totally get like the broad ends of like the spectrum. Like I'm very much a switch, so like I like both sides of it. Like
tying and being tied.
Yeah, and even like going like further, like I actually like know someone like who had a very close friend like come and blindfold them when they didn't know that they were going to be coming in, and like I understand the draw of this fantasy. At the same time, I also understand like the terror of this fantasy.
Sure.
But like you said, kink is the way that we kind of find that aspect of ourselves which you would never otherwise see.
What are some of the more interesting or exciting, I guess, big or elaborate performances, scenes, maybe, that you've been a part of?
A lot of mine have been suspension. Usually it's like you take the time to build each part of it slowly, and then you make sure that it's secure, and then you bring someone up in the air, and then you try to figure out if you have enough time to do something else before they can get someone down. I know it's been like a while since I've done like a very big performative suspension, but a lot of times like it's exploring what's around you and like figuring out like what in your surrounding you can use, and I always like doing that. I know I'm not getting super descriptive in this.
Yeah, well, it's kind of that creative problem solving, MacGyver engineer itch.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting.
Well, which I know we've been kind of circling around this all night, but just highlights for me again the fact that role play is not just about, binding your partner before sex, and the rope culture isn't just about teaching people how to do that. It isn't just come and take this lesson and then go home in the privacy of your bedroom. There's actually a very performative aspect to it oftentimes.
One of my favorite scenes I've ever done, or not done, I've ever watched, I'm totally like, I have the tendency to do this, especially if there's loud music on near me. I have seen someone do like a floor to suspension and then back to the beat of the song with like knots being completed like as the beat's hit.
Ooh, interesting.
And then like person pulled up almost immediately when like a big thing happened in like the song, and then brought down slowly as like the song was coming down. And it's like one of those things where like that person practiced that like, a lot. Like you can do it on just like the go, like if you have really good practice. However, to get like a whole song and to have like a whole routine,
it's like choreographed.
Yeah, it was really cool to watch that.
Is it burlesque? Is it sex? Is it
all
porn?
of the above?
I love that ambiguity of it all.
By the
Sounds
way,
like you're describing Esther's Follies.
Right?
Something which you brought up earlier kind of sparked a thought in my head, which I think is important to like note. And like this is kind of a what's the word? It's to let you know that it's okay. Like a lot of times, like when you tie somebody up with the intention of having sex, like you'll figure out like 2 minutes into like not even having sex yet, but getting started, like, oh shit, that person can't really lie on their back and have their arms like that. Or like a good one is, it's called a futomomo. If you Google it, you'll find it. It's essentially where you wrap the leg really tightly, and if you move someone's shin in that position, it hurts like all hell. So it's like you'll start getting like about to penetrate, and then all of a sudden like you'll shift the leg in the wrong spot, and then there's a loud scream, and it's so like there's a lot of times with these things, like patience is a really like hard learned lesson, where it's like whenever I think everyone's kind of like had the frustration of like trying to find the condom. like where
Sure.
you've just gotten hard, you're just about to have sex, and all of a sudden you're like, fuck, where's that goddamn condom? And so like it's a mood killer. And like something which like rope is like good at teaching is like if you use rope for sex, there's a lot of like, okay, that happened, let's figure it out and fix it.
Yeah.
Rather than like getting frustrated at the exact moment, and like it requires the patience of learning, the patience of understanding, patience of communication, and everything like that. So it's kind of something which requires a lot of time to learn yourself and how to apply it.
I think that's such a valuable, even meditative type of practice. I myself was putting together a workshop today about sexual intelligence, about this idea that sex doesn't need to be like a frenzied rush in order to be meaningful, in order to be important. If you're having super excited, you can't wait to get your hands on each other, elevator sex, then great, good for you. But that's not the only vibe that you're looking for. That's not the only emotion or form of expression that sex or sexuality is meant to be.
Yeah, it's a good way that I like to think about it is like you shouldn't be offended when that's not the feeling that you're having.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, so we've been talking tonight about some, fairly complex, fairly intimidating, and really beautiful things that can be really time-consuming and be a real passion project. But I guess I'm curious if there is room in ropes in general for the very casual hobbyist.
For sure. One thing which I try to fit in whenever I give like a lesson is, okay, like basic. It's called a single column tie. That'll give you a Google search term if you want to learn on your own. The idea is you wrap something around somebody and then tie it in a way that it doesn't get tighter. Any way to achieve that, you've got a single column. Good job. So the idea is like a single column and then attached like a hard point. Like that's your basic, like instead of putting a handcuff and then like chaining it to something or using a strap or like a rope to tie the cuff to something, you've just made your own cuff and then made your own something to tie to something else.
Got it.
That's like the simplest form of like a rope in the bedroom.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to get more into some of that sort of introductory. How do you start to do ropes and all of that? But first, I want to jump back onto the phones and speak with Stefan briefly. Stefan, what can we do for you tonight?
Hi. So just tuning into what you guys are talking about, and I'm assuming it has something to do with like fetishes. So I've got some weird stuff. Somewhat weird stuff. I just recently, in the last month or two, found out that I'm kind of into, I think it's called BDSM, where I can take a lot of pain, and it honestly, it doesn't bother me, but it kind of turns me on a little bit. I've also been able to, I've gotten myself some porno DVDs. The first one, it wasn't, it was a little bit of a surprise to me because I didn't expect it. But after that, I actually had my fiance kind of watch it with me. She's been kind of interested in it. And I've been wondering, is there any way to tell whether or not precisely,
You could read her mind and know how she would react if you were to be vulnerable or share these kinds of things?
Kind of, yeah. I know a good amount about her. We've been together for quite some time, but I'm trying to figure out, do you like these things, or how do you feel about it? Because I already know she's okay with me watching that kind of stuff around her. And we've gone at it, a little bit while watching these videos. I'm trying to figure out whether or not she actually likes it. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Well, sure. You could sort of just lay things around the house and see how she reacts and casually sneak things into conversation and maybe watch a TV show or a movie that has something featured in it and just sort of see how she reacts. Or you could have a conversation, which I think is what I would really recommend, that instead of trying to guess at or figure out how she might react, just see how she reacts. And, I understand that can be intimidating. I don't mean to be overly blasé about it, but I would say that any healthy relationship worth holding on to is going to have a component of strong communication and open honesty and vulnerability.
Right. Yeah. We've been pretty good. We've been pretty good at that. It's one of those things where I'm trying to figure out, okay, what turns you on the most? I mean, I know what gets me off. I just want to know what exactly turns you on the most. And I mean, she's been kind of raised. Of course, she's been raised in a bit of a religious background, so it's a little bit more difficult. But I'm doing my best to work with her. But what can I do to make the experience more pleasurable? And for your guests, I can say definitely, I kind of want to try that just to see what happens. Even though honestly it's expensive, I'm pretty sure, but I want to see what happens.
Yeah, it can be, but with enough dedication and if it really is something you're interested in, there are tons of different opportunities, and we'll get into that a little bit more here in just a bit. But I guess I would say that what you're describing, that conversation of what are you into and what would you like and how can I make this great for you, that's dating. That's sex, that's love, that's marriage, that's whatever. That's the whole game. And I know it can feel really intimidating, and I so hear what you're saying about that blockage, that anxiety, especially when there's religious moralizing and all of these bits of shame. And so, one place to start is to acknowledge some of those shame or guilt feelings in yourself as you're experiencing them, because a lot of what you're going to bring to the table during that conversation is going to be based on how you perceive these things and some of your own incongruities. So addressing those things in yourself, I think, is an important step. What else would y'all recommend in sort of rolling out these kinks and I guess just checking in with your partner?
Yeah, I would say, and I'm speaking from experience here, as somebody who also grew up in a religious household, for a long time I just didn't think about it. It's not... Pleasure for people with vaginas is not considered important in culture generally, but especially in Christian religious culture. So it just wasn't a thought for a very long time. So the fact that she, I'm assuming it's a she, has a partner who's willing to go there and and try and maximize her pleasure might be a brand new experience for her. And asking, what do you like, while amazing, might also just be like, I don't know, what do I like? I've never thought about this before. I've never experimented with this before. How do I know what I like in myself, let alone telling another partner this? So one thing, if you guys feel like you have built up that level of trust, might be to kind of take the pressure off of your partner a little bit and say, okay, let's try a couple things. And at any point, you can say, stop, I don't like that, or I do like that. But maybe experiment a little bit playing around with your partner and just trying things out and seeing how they react.
Right, yeah.
I have an interesting... I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
An interesting concept which I had given to me once is everyone has, I think, like the right to kind of express like what they want to happen to them. If you want to experience something, it's good to kind of classify that in like your life as like a must-have, really want to have, maybe kind of want to have, and then like I always call them like deal breakers of like, if this is not like a relationship, like I'm not going to be happy. So, but also like when we're doing it tonight, like just try hitting me with this, or like just sitting on like the bed and just be like, can you smack me a few times with this? I want to see how it feels. It does not have to be like prohibitively expensive, or you can even make a game out of creativity, like go grab some chopsticks and a couple of rubber bands and now you have some nipple clamps.
Well, and I also have to mention, if you want to check out one of our previous episodes when Andy and Megan Church were here talking about how to create your own low-budget, lo-fi, really interesting and exciting sex toys.
And a lot of it is this is the hardest thing of like what I'm trying to talk about is feeling the freedom to express the desire to experiment with something sexually. We talked about female sexuality in like the Christian culture, and another part of the Christian culture is it's sinful to kind of like be selfish about what you want in a corporeal way. Mm-hmm. So like it's difficult to get over the aspect of like, I want to try something. I have someone who's willing to try something. Let's try it, rather than the like, no, it's bad to enjoy your body.
Right.
Like it's completely fine to express that selfish aspect of sexuality and to like, and to bring it full circle, like the idea of guiding a scene where you are on the bottom, but you're topping from the bottom is a bad way to put it because it's got a bad connotation, and I shouldn't have it, where it's like, I want you to do this to me. I'm going to guide you through the process. And like that way you're doing it together. She doesn't have to step out of the comfort zone of like being completely in charge of the situation, where like someone can be like hurting you while you're telling them to hurt you. It gets more complicated if you're like don't want to have any control of the hurting, which is a different fantasy, but we're not going to talk about that in this exact moment. But it's a lot of it is like feeling comfortable being selfish and feeling comfortable like asking for this small thing. And something which I wanted to comment on is you don't have to feel rushed in this experience. Like you're going to have a long time with this person. A day is a decent amount of time. A week gives you plenty of opportunities to try something that might take no more than 5 minutes. It's kind of difficult to look at time as like it's you want to do it all now, but you don't have to because you're going to have many opportunities to do it.
Avoiding sort of that gold rush mentality and reminding yourself that, you do have a lifetime to explore these things. And Stefan, I would say that, after you've had some of these initial conversations around like, hey, I'd like to try this little thing, and how do you feel about that? And you'd like to try that little thing. You can kind of gamify some of these conversations. There are all sorts of different like online tests you can take to go through all the different kinks that you might be interested in. There are phone apps where you can both, swipe right on a particular kink, and you won't be alerted unless both of you have swiped right on it. And so you wouldn't have to be worried about like exposing yourself unless she's also exposed herself as being interested in something. And so there are these kind of different strategies, and I think that can be a lot of fun, but I would encourage you to just start from a place of, we don't need to get there yet. We don't need to be worrying about safe words and consensual non-consent and these elaborate things yet. We can just sort of enjoy, hey, we watched porn together while we were having sex. That's kind of kinky. That was sort of fun. Would you want to do that again? And what kind of video would you want it to be? And hey, that looks fun. Maybe we should do that sometime. And just take it very casually without a sense of obligation, I would say.
I mean, the only thing I can say is, we haven't had sex yet. But I mean, that's besides the point. And also, the other thing, I mean, I've actually told her, hey, I'm into hitting, or you can spank me, you can grab my ass, do whatever you want to. And I'm assuming she's not comfortable with it, but like you said, it's probably one of those things. Okay, just keep expressing it and see what happens, and maybe in the future, maybe it will definitely work out, and maybe she'll be more comfortable with it. You just, like you said, I just gotta be patient and work with her, and let her know this is not a bad thing. Trust me, I'm not gonna do anything. I'm not gonna sexually oppress you. It's just something that I'm honestly into. So
Yeah.
I definitely get that.
Well, while also just not to contradict everything we've already said, but to also just say being willing to take no for an answer and being willing to acknowledge that while she may warm up to some of these ideas, she may not. And if that means that this relationship isn't for you, then that's a tough decision to come to. But ultimately, if she is saying no, you want to make sure to be respecting that as well and making space for that.
I was gonna go in like the same direction where it's you have to accept someone for who they are, and like I said earlier, like you kind of take things in your like relationship and you say like I need this in every like relationship. Like I can say if I'm in a relationship which is not kinky, that relationship will not last. That's just me personally. At the same time, like everyone is different. Everyone has different levels of what they want and what they don't want. And part of the hardest things about a relationship is like shelving that fantasy and like understanding like the person which I'm with, the person that I love, like this is what they're into, this is what they're not into, and like not getting angry or frustrated or impatient or here's a really good way to explain it. If somebody does something specifically for you, they can do it for you a few times if they're not into it. If you're lucky, after that point, or perhaps before that point, it will have no enjoyment. And to me, and personally, that removes the fun of it. Like if someone is doing something coldly for you because they know that you like it, they won't be able to do it a lot. Like they won't be able to do it many times, and it won't be convincing whenever it's done. And I think that it's much better for a relationship to just accept that and move on than just allow yourself to get frustrated or angry over time, years perhaps, of something that you really want to happen not happening.
Right.
So I know that's a lot to hold in your head because we're telling you, both things. be open and vulnerable and communicative, but also know your limits and know that, she may not be on board and that's okay. So I know that that's a tough balance to maintain, and I hope that you'll take a look at some of the resources that we'll include in the footnotes to this episode. We're going to talk a little bit more about maybe some introductory to kink type things and some different workshops and resources. So I hope you'll take a look at all of that and let us know if anything else comes to mind, anything else we can help with.
All right. Thank you guys so much for everything.
Absolutely. Have a great night.
Thanks for calling in.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance. I know I personally love knife play. Like that to me is like so fun and exciting. And one of my partners is like, nope, nope, can't do it. Can't be on the receiving end, can't be on the giving end of that. So we've been looking at toys that are like, they almost look like little like pizza cutters. And they're like just...
A Wartenberg wheel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, well, this probably has a similar effect, so let's try with this. You're not drawing blood, you're not cutting me, nothing, But so even just like starting in that space of like, okay, here's something you want to do, here's something I want to do, or something I want to do that you're not comfortable with. Let's start here, right?
Yeah.
And we don't need to get farther, but like if we can reach that place of, okay, what's something that works for both of us?
And there are creative workarounds like that where
Right.
you're finding these different strategies of achieving that same emotional need, that same sexual goal. But it starts from a place of both you and your partner not having all of this shame. If he was telling you the fact that you like knives is disgusting and gross and should be like ripped out of you, then yeah, you're not going to be able to like workshop together a way around that. So, with all of that, whether I guess we're talking about introductory rope play or even more just sort of general BDSM 101, what's the best place to get started?
I know this is most things on the internet. You have to sift through a lot of things. Generally, YouTube is really good. If you go and like look up a video, if you just like look shibari, you can kind of start that rabbit hole and figure out what you like and what you don't like. It's my personal practice is to watch multiple videos or multiple things by different people and that way you can kind of figure out who you should trust and who you shouldn't
Sure.
trust. It's like I
Form
said,
a bit
like,
of consensus and have a very critical eye.
yeah, and like if you just look up single column, like that'll give you a bunch of different pings on like how to tie a rope around something without it tightening. I like a lot of books. I find they're like, we were having this conversation before we started, where it's like having a book open, like being able to have it next to you is for some reason easier to like do crafty things. So Douglas Kent, if you can find his books, are excellent. There's The Two Naughty Boys, are kind of like a Western rope bondage. Anything by Lee Harrington, Shibari You Can Use, I believe, is what his book is called. Midori has an introductory bondage. She's a really well-known mistress / educator. I'm sure that's not the best classification for it, but it came to my head.
Yeah, no, fair to say. Yeah, and then I guess I also just want to make sure people know that are here local that you are, previewing for us, I guess, a little bit of what your workshop is going to look like coming up on March 29th. And as I mentioned, that's at forbiddenfruit.com/workshops. I know that y'all have things coming up to teach oral and witch rope craft and BDSM 2.0 and anal sex and all of these kinds of things. I really want to encourage people to be willing, whether they're here in Austin, whether they're in any major city, there's going to be that great locally owned sex shop that has these types of workshops.
I'll also plug it. The group which I founded is now known as the Austin Rope Slingers.
Nice.
They do still exist, and every Monday, if you go on FetLife and find them, you can ask them for like the address. It jumps around Austin. And I believe they're still doing parties every Saturday. Saturday, first Saturday of the month.
Okay.
But yeah, if you want like a place to practice, like the entire group was founded on like, if you know something and someone wants to learn it, like you're pushed to teach that person, like no matter who you are or what's going on like around you, like it's there to be an open exchange of information.
So getting plugged into your local kink community, and I know we've talked about that before, but it can feel a little intimidating. But if you've never done it, I can tell you going to a munch, the vast majority of the time, is going to feel just like going to a networking event or a cocktail hour or, some work party. There can be a little bit of that social anxiety around meeting new people. But these particular people aren't any more biting or scary or intimidating. And I have found personally to be perhaps even much more welcoming than many, many other communities.
Something which it's really good to know this. I did not know this before I jumped into the community. Kinky people are really fucking nerdy.
Yeah.
So like
It's true.
if you want to meet some of the most awkward, nerdy, like gamer dudes, I like just people who you would not expect to be that person, that's your kink community.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, if you don't know where the local munches are and you for some reason can't find them online, probably head to a comic book store or a board game store and just kind of linger.
They might not be open, but you might get, you might be surprised who you'll see later whenever you actually do go to a munch.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second, I saw you there.
Well, as people are getting started, what are the really common mistakes and things to avoid? I know we talked a little bit about safety and communication, but is there anything that you would say everyone who even so much as touches a rope should know before they start?
The really basic ones are like what feels right and what doesn't feel right. I always explain it that like there's something that's wrong and then there's something that you don't like. Like if you don't like your hand turning purple, then say that, but that's not technically terribly dangerous. I don't know if you guys knew this, but EMS uses tourniquets for the past several years now. Just because you really don't see tissue damage until after several hours since like the blood loss has gone, except for around the neck, which happens a lot faster.
Important to know, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm fine. fine for
That
several of us,
tracks.
guys.
Yeah,
It's fine.
I'm not a biologist, but I get it.
But yeah, like but the other idea is like if half of your hand is tingling, then that's a nerve pinch, and you don't want that. You can get drop wrist where you cannot like lift up your hand for like up to a month, which if you use a pencil in your daily job can be a problem.
And a difficult injury to explain.
Yeah.
Like, I just fell down some stairs. My wrist doesn't work now.
So it's a lot of it is like blood loss is one thing, but having a nerve tingle, a burn, anything that like it's half of your hand versus your whole hand. Another one is it's hard to show, but because I'm wearing long sleeve. But if you feel on the upper arm, there's a split in the tricep, and you can kind of feel the nerve right there. It's always good whenever you're tying someone new to find that nerve and then avoid it. Another one is like I said, like knowing time limits. Like it's difficult to do this without experience, but like how long do you have on like that arm? Like keeping that open communication going. Understanding that if you do like a dragonfly tie and someone's arms are behind their back like this and their arm starts going tingly and you made it overly elaborate and pretty because you just get obsessed with those types of things. Now you have to untie that over elaborate pretty thing before their hand starts to feel really bad. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. I have. It gets kind of panicky, and that's not very good for concentrating. So it's like, keep in mind times and things like that.
Yeah, you said at one point that however long it takes you to tie a knot is more or less how long it's going to take you to untie it.
About, yeah.
Which feels like a really important just tidbit to hold on to.
Yeah, even if you're super fast at it, it's...
I've also heard, so when you want to be fastening somebody more securely, it's not tighter rope, it's more rope. Is that a common?
It's... You have to know how to apply it.
Okay.
I do agree with you. Think about joint movement. Like, I can move my elbow here, I can move my wrist here, I can move my shoulder there. If you restrict this, and then this, then I really can't move anything. So in that sense, yes, more rope. A lot of that is just like keeping in mind like anatomy, like knowing how to immobilize something so that someone, it has an additive effect.
Okay.
Something which is like always thinking 5 steps ahead is like whenever you tie off, like don't tie off in direct reach of someone if you don't want them to be able to get out.
Yeah.
Or if you want to like leave the room, which is never like super duper safe, but if you like live with like your partner and like you want them to have like an escape route, give them an immediate escape route, which then they can get out. It's a lot of it is like think about your situation. What do you want to achieve? Like, I personally love having super tight stuff to struggle against, and I'm okay with accepting the pain that comes with that. At the same time, like, some people that I tie with don't want it super tight and probably won't fight it, so don't do it super tight.
It really does come down to the experience that you're looking for. Because for me, like my partners often think I'm kind of just being an asshole because I'm not trying to condescend to your knot tying skills, but if I can get out of it, the experience is kind of dulled for me. And so I'm not trying to like make it hard on you. It's just part of what I'm looking for. And so that's something to communicate and I guess be aware of. But also, all of that starts with just curiosity. You know, how do you know what you don't know? How do you know what you are interested in if you're not willing to just sort of explore without feeling as if this or the next or any particular experience has to be the one, has to be perfect, has to be just right?
Yeah, every experience is going to be different, and it's good to accept that.
Sure. Well, in just the couple of minutes that we have left, is there a particular knot or anything simple that you could choose just to get started with?
I mean, I can try.
Fair.
It's going to be difficult to get the camera right.
If you can kind of walk us through it. We've got the podcast listeners as well, but I'd love to walk away with some kind of demonstration.
So your basic single column tie, like I said, it's a goal to essentially wrap something around a single column.
Sure.
or a double column because it's the same knot, that it will not get tighter. So in general, you have multiple wraps around.
So you have the rope kind of doubled over, so you're using, I guess, 2 strings in that way.
You don't have to, but this is like the way that everyone's always taught.
Okay.
Like, because you can use this as like a bite or a pulley or something to connect to later.
So because you have a loop rather than just a loose end.
It also distributes weight.
Right. Okay.
If you have like a single wrap around something, or if you're tying,
You're going to pinch a little bit more if you're
Yeah.
using a single strand.
and it's also this is practice rather than just concept. But it's if all your ropes are not evenly have even tension against them, then you'll get the same thing. So whenever you have a wrap like this, you then take it and you make an X right there. And then I always use my finger like a crochet hook. So I pass it to my finger and then pull through. This is an overhand knot. You just did the overhand knot around stuff. Second, you do a square knot. This is called a monkey twist. So essentially I feel like I'm performing puppetry.
Yeah, a little bit. And I guess the thing to hold on to is that what you're showing us, I do feel like after 2 or 3 tries, I'd be able to get as somebody who doesn't have any experience in rope craft. I mean, I'm basically tying shoelace knots as a general principle.
But if you tie your shoelaces correctly, which most people are not doing.
Okay, you have strong opinions about the correct way to tie a shoelace. I should have known that going in. I guess it makes a certain kind of sense.
If you tie your shoelaces properly, everybody, I learned this in a TED Talk. It was really condescending. Your laces should be perpendicular with your shoe. If you tie your laces incorrectly, like everybody, your laces will be parallel with your shoe.
Okay. Yeah,
and they're resting. It's a granny knot versus a square knot. We won't go down that route.
Okay, but these all feel, they feel not just very Googleable, but very achievable. You know, and I guess that's the biggest thing for me is this does all seem like something that could be so intimidating because you go from the fuzzy pink novelty handcuffs, which I guess just real quick PSA before we get any further down this road. If your product says novelty on the side, know what that means. Know that likely means it should not be used for actual play.
Yeah, it's used to decorate your bedroom.
Exactly. But people move from those fuzzy pink novelty handcuffs, and then it's like, well, what is the next step? And it can feel so intimidating, but this feels very practical.
So something which I always teach people whenever I'm teaching rope is that like the most important thing that you can know is how to tell if you did something right. So if you're looking at this and you have watched your YouTube video and you've done the knot and you feel that the knot's good, pull on every single aspect of that knot and see if you can get it to start getting tighter right there. If you can't, then just continue with whatever you were about to do. If it starts to get tighter, you did something wrong. So it's a really easy way to just make sure if you got it right. And even if you pull it and it's just slightly, barely, whatever getting tighter, that's still going to be a problem, like, after you've tied up the rope and now you have this thing, like, looped around something, and now you can't quickly untie that knot without untying.
Because it's like an upstream knot, I guess.
Yeah. Now you don't actually have to like put the thing around something and then you can just quick release someone's arm straight out, and then that usually solves your problems. But there's multiple ways to practice this, and like you said, like if someone can easily get out of something, I share that. Like if I'm fighting like the ropes and I can easily get out of it, like it's defeated the purpose for me.
Sure.
So it's, yeah. And like any skill, you're learning a new tool. Something which I like people to keep in mind is that rope is one of the oldest tools that humans have had.
Sure.
Like tens of thousands, if not more years. So it's something which is very primal and innate in our genetic. I don't know if genetic's the right word, but we've had it for a long goddamn time.
Yeah. And there's so much to learn, and whether you are just that sort of part-time casual hobbyist, there's still an opportunity to find a really lifelong hobby. I mean, some people fish, some people paint. Rope play can really become a lifestyle in so many ways, which, may be intimidating to some and may not be for everybody, but why not be curious? Why not investigate? It's such a huge part of so many people's lives. I'd encourage everybody who is kind of wondering about it to scratch that itch, to try something new if you haven't before.
Something else which I think holds true in a lot of aspects of life, and you see it a lot in the rope community too, is that in general, if anybody tells you that there's only one way, or more specifically that their way is right, they're wrong. And go about your life in whatever way that you want. I just make it a habit to try to not trust that or
disqualify anybody who feels like there is one way only.
It'll also make me look for other ways, because like the knot that I just showed you, like that's a single column. There's 20 other ways to achieve that exact same process, and every other step in rope, there's 20 ways to figure out how to do that. And even like once you've been playing with it like long enough, like anyone who's like knit can stare at something and figure out exactly what happened. You hit like a point where you can look at it and see how to arrange it in your head, and then arrange it in that way to achieve what you wanted.
The way a talented musician can hear a song and, with a little bit of experimentation, pick it out by ear.
Yeah, and like it's you can go and watch videos and see like how does that person do that? And the person does it because they've spent a lot of time and practice doing it. So if you really want to learn the skill, number one, know that you don't need a person to do it. You can do it on a chair, like anything. But it's if you care for it to be an art form, like don't try to classify it as sexual. You don't have to. It can become macrame. Just tell people that you do macrame when they're like, why do you have all this rope lying around your house? Be like, oh, I make plant baskets. Leave me alone. Like it is an art form. Like it's like in the 60s, it was a huge art form, but it's a really old art form.
Those kids that grew up doing like the cat's cradle and getting really into yo-yo and all of these sorts of things have just taken a little further. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. I of course want to remind people to, again, check out your workshop coming up, to check out a lot of the great workshops at forbiddenfruit.com, as well as to keep this conversation going, to make sure to jump into the Discord, to find us on Facebook, and to be a part of this atheist community, which is a lot more than just us sitting in front of microphones and talking to you. It's something we hope that you'll join us in.
Yeah, we have some places for you to reach out to us if you've got questions. We are on Twitter at Secular Sex. If you want to send us an email that we will read on air, then that email is sex@atheist-community.org. And if you would like to leave us a voicemail to play on air and then answer, you can reach us at 512-666-0ASK. That's our hotline at 512-666-0275.
All right, and with that, I suppose it's time to thank everybody who watched tonight and thank them for joining us. I want to, of course, thank our incredibly talented crew for all of their hard work and making sure that this gets out each and every week. Yeah, there's our crew cam. And then be sure to remind everybody watching that whether they're going to tie themselves up or tie up their partner, that they find a way to give themselves a big ol' orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.